In 2019, we purchased a half acre of land in the Mount Hood Forest, just outside of Mount Hood Village in Oregon, with the hopes that one day we would be able to build a cabin there. A land situated next to the Sandy River. And little did we know, within the first 5 to 6 months, the COVID lockdowns would happen and I would be working from home. So I asked my oldest son if he'd like to join me in starting to build a cabin on the land. So we packed up the generator, our tents, cement mixer, and we headed to Oregon. While we were there, this American robin, or one of several, I'm not certain, but they would visit us very frequently, probably because we had scraps laying around, and we had plenty of campfires during our time there. Initially, we wanted to build a storage unit to keep the equipment in and some supplies. That idea grew, and it grew to become more of a place or a refuge for us to sleep and get out of the weather. You can see we poured cement footings for this unit, and we built the base and then started coating and protecting the wood from the weather, because it does rain quite frequently there in Oregon. It was one of our many oatmeal breakfasts while we were there. We use this standard pre-primed exterior panels that they have there at Home Depot for this unit, because the intention initially was for it just to be a storage unit, but you could see the height. We used the full 8-foot length of the lumber so that we could get the height going there and put in a loft. That would get us up and out of the weather from our tents. We did endure a few storms while we were in the tents there. I slept really well, and my kids and one of the neighbors in the area there said that the storm was really loud and really heavy and windy. I don't remember any of that. I just remember getting a good night's sleep. We decided to put a full-size shower in, and the rear 3 feet of the cabin there, the little tiny storage unit, and you can see there's the wall, so there's a separate entry for a shower room. And this is the loft in the tiny home there. We were able to fit a full-size mattress in there, and with a nice comfy memory foam mattress there. That was a world of difference getting out of the weather. That rear 3 feet, we installed a separate access door so that we could get to the shower room. See some of the initial drainage there, which I ended up converting that from a container to a large recovery. Initially, we thought about putting the toilet in the shower room, but having the loft above, we decided against that. We would later build an outhouse. As with most ideas, we put a porch there because there was quite a bit of rain, and we were actually using a grill to cook our food. And initially we used a campfire metal grate over a campfire, but that moved on to a propane grill later. This is some of the time that we took off when we were able to go and visit the areas in Gresham, Main City Park, and Lalo Pass, and Seaside Beach along the ocean there. My son and his fiance were able to visit and help us out over the weekend for a little bit, and before they had to return to Yosemite where they live. We weren't sure whether we would call it a shed or a tiny home, but it turned out to be very useful and very practical for all of our needs. We were able to use it as storage, although we did finish the inside. This was done with a leaf from one of the trees there, just to not waste any of the cement we had left over. We realized real soon two of the most important things were getting a shower and having a restroom. So it didn't take very long before we built the outhouse, and we went with the Separate, which is an off-grid style toilet. Research more about that. It's similar to another model called Nature's Head. The one thing that was on the property when we got to the land was the fire pit there in the middle, so we used it quite a bit. By August of 2020, we all had to go back to work. My oldest son had to go back to work, and so did I. So as I started building the main cabin, I was on my own for quite a bit. My wife would come and help me. And from time to time, my son was able to come and help me as well, like on the porch, as you'll see here, and the video coming up shortly. This was a trip I went up over the weekend. I had a weekend where I had a 3-day weekend, and I was able to get up and build the base. And you can see the space there was where the porch is going to be. The original idea I got from watching some of the videos online on YouTube, and obviously I was trying to do off-grid, so it needed to be under 200 square feet. There's a lot of videos out there, and you just have to look at what you want and try to make sure that, structurally you're going to follow a certain design so that you have the right structure and the right strength. You can see the tarps covering the structure. As I mentioned, I would go up over a weekend or take a week off, and the rest of the cabin was built that way. I would have to take a week off and build the walls. We put tarps up for weather, and then, as you'll see here shortly, we got some of the work done, but you have to protect it from the weather while we were away until the next time we could come back. But as you've seen in the picture there earlier, there was some smoke in the sky, and in 2020 there was some wildfires that went through Oregon, some of the most destructive in Oregon's history, and those fires got relatively close to where we were, and we weren't sure how things were going to be. At one point we ended up having to load our trailer and park our vehicle out at the airport area. These couple of pictures here are just some examples of what I looked at for the roof support structure. You can see the center beam coming in, and then the support truss beams being put in one by one and added to it. The idea on the inside originally was to have some sunlight windows up in the roof there, but we ended up modifying that and not installing the sunlight windows. I think there's a greater risk of having a roof leak if you have any kind of penetration into the roof structure. There's the pictures of the wildfire zones and parking at the airport with the riding mower and the generator and the motorcycle. That storm actually took out a cabin next door to where I'm located, and fortunately that neighbor did have insurance and was able to have his small cabin rebuilt. And that's our dog Kiki. We made many trips into town to get supplies and lumber and other materials. Unfortunately, during that time period, there was a lot of unrest going on in Portland, and even though we're out in the mountain community, we would have to come in towards Portland to get supplies, and unfortunately there was a lot of rioting and different things going on in the city of Portland, and we were just happy to go back into the Forrest area and kind of get out away from all the madness that was going on at the time. This is the loft in the main cabin. It's about 8 feet by 14 and a half feet wide. One of the tough things is when you're covering that structure with tarps, it's really hard to get it to be perfect and protect from all of the weather. But we did get some really heavy-duty clamps and things like that from Harbor Freight. They were very helpful to make sure that the wind and things didn't blow the tarp off. So that was a success. And this was a weekend where my oldest son came out to help me build the porch. And as we did with the main cabin, you notice that we built the loft first so that we would have a place to stand on and build the roof out from there. I did the same thing inside of the main cabin. I put up the beams throughout the whole cabin, and then I ran 2x6s where in the middle and on the sides where I could stand on to build the roof. The black wrap that you see around the cabin structure is a snow and ice cap. A lot of times that's used on the roof structure before you put on the whether it's tiles or metal roofing. We wrapped the cabin itself, we wrapped all of the cabin with that, and really went, I don't want to say overboard because I don't think you can ever go overboard, but we really went heavy duty around the window frames. We did the snow and ice cap wrap on the roof as well. We really wanted to make sure that we protected the structure because of the heavy snowfall and the amount of rain that happens in that region. Because we were doing things 1 week or 1 weekend at a time, you'll see that we did the flooring on the inside of the cabin, but we still had other things that we needed to do. So we had the opportunity to bring a sectional sofa and a table and some other things. So before we really finished the interior and with insulation and paneling, we kind of already started to move in like the cabinets, and we found a really good butcher block countertop, and so we started utilizing the space before we really had it fully finished. But it wasn't too hard to move things around and finish the interior. I wanted to do metal paneling on the roof, but they didn't have them available in the length that I needed. And so we had a few days before leaving, and I decided to go ahead and do the shingles on the roof, and I just figured I would do that before we came back home to California. That was our Ghetto Edition Yahtzee there. We played that quite a bit. Actually, it turned out really good because we lined it with felt, so we still have it. This was the solar panel, solar-powered operation that we had set up there with the battery and power inverter to a breaker. During one cold weekend in January, I went out to insulate the interior, and we put another wrap of Owens Corning before putting shingles onto the exterior cabin. We went with the cedar wavy edge type of exterior siding. And there it is there. We found a really nice place in Sherwood, south of Portland, and it's called Lumber Material Resource, or LMR. And here's a guide on making sure you get those shingles installed properly in case you decide you want to do that yourself. The LMR was a really wonderful resource because wood was becoming very expensive, and that liquidator, they sell it as is, and so you have to really make sure you get the amount you need because you might not find it there if you go back to get more next time. So we measured 2 or 3 times to make sure we had the right amount. And on that last trip, our dog Tiki made one last trip in 2023 to the property there in Oregon before she passed away. That's a salamander that we just happened to see along the wetland areas on the walkway to the river. The property's located along the Oregon Trail, along the river, so deer will from time to time, they will come walking through the property. This is a video where you get to see the exterior of the property. In winter, we get about 2 to 3 feet of snow. and I hadn't insulated the interior of the cabin yet. So I spent a weekend up there installing this material. It's called Reflectix. And then I also put the other pink insulation on top of that. And so the cabin is very well insulated. They have some of this Reflectix. It's kind of like aluminized bubble wrap. But there's a Home Depot brand of it. It's not very good at all. If you're going to do this, look for the Reflectix brand. It's well worth finding. It's probably double the quality of what the Home Depot brand had. That's our version of the McGriddle there. Had a few trees that we had to have dropped because they were dead. And so that required cutting up quite a bit of wood. And so I added a little extension off of the shed so that I would have an area to keep the wood that I cut out of the weather. It takes a while to cure the wood. You can't just cut it up and start to burn it or anything like that. So I had to have it covered. That's a little diagram and some information on the solar panel. You can look up based on your region and where you're located and what time of year you should have the angle of your panel. It's pretty low right there, and that was probably midsummer. It's a little bit higher because of how far north the property is located. My son built a structure support right there so that we could mount the chimney through the wall and then out and up. Instead of going through the roof and the interior, we decided we wanted to have it go out the side wall. As I mentioned, not having any penetrations through the roof limits the risk of having a leak into your cabin or over your porch. We used the Durock and the high heat insulation around the wall on both sides where the wood stove was going. I added the other pink stuff insulation there before putting in the paneling. And that was the load of panels that we got there from LMR as well. Those are 16-foot pieces. I wanted to make sure I didn't have to have cut section pieces on any of the walls or the ceiling. And so that worked out really well. Just took some measuring and planning to make sure I got the right quantity of the 8-foot, 10-foot, and 16-foot pieces. That was an example of the upper near the ceiling area there, where I laid it out on the porch. That was probably the toughest part of installing the paneling, was doing the ceiling because of the angled cuts. And those are about 15 feet long. And making sure I cut them properly and not too short, and getting them installed, that was really hard work up there. We went with really low wattage lighting. All of those LED lights are 3 or 5 watt lighting, so it uses very little power on the solar system. After a lot of work, it's nice to take a break, and Lalo Pass is just up the road from us. It's not very far at all. It's a nice scenic route. This was another weekend where my son was able to come out and help me install a water line to the well water house that's located on my neighbor's property. And the only thing is his well is about 170 feet away from where I needed it to go. So that required quite a bit of digging and trenching. So we rented a trencher there from Home Depot, and that was real helpful. We did have to call the utilities if you're going to trench anywhere on property, even if you're off grid out there, as I found out. You can call for free in Oregon, and they'll come out and mark if any utilities are running across your property. And I found out that there is a cable line running under the ground, which I would have cut if I didn't call. So definitely call ahead before doing any digging. This is the installation of the sink. We cut into the counter of the butcher block to install the sink. You see a small sink there. And we used the wood that we cut out, and I sanded it. And my wife actually did some wood burning art later on that piece of wood block, and it became a cutting board. We used a propane heater for hot water at the shower. That was a life changer there. Having hot water shower was pretty spectacular. We had been using water collected from the river, which is quite cold. After using the butcher block counter, I had the idea to get a piece of it and cut it in that manner so that I would have 3 shelves, one next to the sink there, and 2 others over by the back corner where the table is. I like the thickness, it looks real durable. It worked out really well. Installed a coat rack there next to where the wood stove is, and that works out really well. When the wood stove is going, you can dry your shoes or hang your coats. I ended up extending an awning on both sides of the porch. On one side for the steps to try to keep them out of the weather. You can see the stain there. But on the other side for a propane grill, and it keeps the grill covered. We did have a visitor here, and my wife couldn't help but feed the deer strawberries and an apple, and I'm sure that will keep them coming around. Later we put some stone pavers around the base of the cabin, and that's real helpful where the water and the rainwater runs off the roof, and it just keeps the ground from getting eroded there. Found a creative way to heat a can of chicken, and as you can see, it got up to about 82 degrees in the cabin there. So I realized I couldn't put 2 or 3 pieces of wood in the wood stove, because with all that insulation, it didn't take much to heat it up on the inside. This is at the Sandy River there next to the property, and we do see quite a bit of wildlife. We did hook up a projector there and project it onto the wall. We really don't watch TV much when we're at the cabin. A neighbor friend brought some Neatart oysters from Neatart's Bay, and I'm not a big oyster fan. Those were really good though off the grill. My wife did some artwork with the wood burning tool on some of the coasters that we had, the cedar coasters. As practice to doing this landscape scenery. And so we have that hanging in the cabin. This, you'll see the Sasquatch at the Portland airport. These are some of the ideas I had. You can harvest rainwater. Maybe I'll think about that at a later time. With the backdrop of Mount Hood there, we've enjoyed quite a few trips to Trillium Lake and hiking the Timberline Trail around Mount Hood. My son not catching, but having a bird rest there. Hope you enjoyed the video, and please visit the channel.